Um, Good morning, sir. I think we are good to go. I'll start with the session.
Yeah.
Right. A very good morning to all the dignitaries, guests, and delegates. My name is Rubia Farhaz, and on behalf of Maharana Pratap College of Pharmacy, I welcome each one of you in the day 2 of Faculty Development Program. So before going to the session, I'd like to mention that if you face any sorts of questions during the session, you can write it in the chat box, and at the end of session, we can take it on your behalf. So now I take the pleasure of introducing our first speaker for the day, Dr. R. Vadivelan. Dr. R. Vadivelan is a professor in pharmacology at JSS College of Pharmacy, Ooty. Dr. R. Vadivelan has got 18 years of professional experience. His area of research is endocrine and cardiovascular pharmacology in diabetes and myocardial infarction. Sir has received APP Best Teacher Award for his outstanding academic contribution during 2019 at APP 8th Annual Conventional and 4th India-US Conference at JSS College of Pharmacy, Ooty. Dr. Vadivelan has made 22 presentations, published 64 national and international research publications, and has authored one book named Practical Handbook of Human Physiology. As a resource person, Dr. Vadivelan has delivered more than 20 lectures in various institutions in the area of preclinical pharmacology. He has guided 27 PG students and 2 PhD scholars as well. He is the present president of Indian Pharmaceutical Association, Nilgiris branch, and life member of IPHA, IHPA, IPA, LASA, and APP. With this, I invite Dr. Vadivelan for the plenary talk on the topic, Ethical Guidelines in Preclinical Research, Key Perspectives. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, moderator. So first of all, I would like to thank the management of Maharana Pratap College of Pharmacy, Kanpur, especially the patrons, secretary, and also the president and convener of the FDP on advancement of digital education and pandemic era. So I think you have selected a very good title for this program where I'll be able to discuss what is the importance of the title of this FDP for this present pharmacy education. And I also would like to thank the core committee members, the members who have contacted me regarding this webinar for the FDP program. And also I thank the guy who has introduced me. I think we'll have a good session at the end of my session to go for the Q&A discussion if you have anything. And if the committee permits, I think I can start right now. Hello? Yeah, I'm starting right now. Yeah. You can start. Okay, so once again, good morning to one and all. As I mentioned to you, so coming to the title of the today's presentation, it is Ethical Guidelines in Preclinical Research, the key perspectives. If you see, there are plenty of ethical guidelines followed throughout globe and nation related with the preclinical research. So mainly here I am going to focus a few important topics where I could discuss to give a brief introduction about what is the animal ethics which is followed in our country and what is preclinical research. So for a basic person, introductory with the animal studies, it is important to know about what is preclinical research. And always there is an important genesis, which you call the 3Rs concept, in which the first R, which you are following in our medical and pharmacy education, which is implemented by UGC, MCA as well as PCI. And then what are the ethical guidelines which are been following globally and in India? So more specifically, while focusing on India, we look at how this regulatory framework on animal welfare existed and the current guidelines what we are following for the laboratory animal facility is a CPC SCA. So that is the heart of the today's presentation. And then let us conclude with that. So starting with the first slide, coming to preclinical research. So whenever we use the research, the two divisions mainly, one you call preclinical research, the other one you call it as non-clinical research. So preclinical means where we involve the animals, So today you know that in this COVID-19 pandemic era, without animal research, there will not be any development of any type of vaccine into the market. Still, it is under development, but however, the testing is taking place with the large animals. So therefore, the animal studies are considered to be one of the important in the drug development process, as well as some of the ethics to be followed, the guidelines to be followed during this drug development process. Therefore, this preclinical research is used to establish the rationale for conducting the clinical trial, and then also the pharmacological and toxicological effects of target product for specific patient population. So coming to the 5 stages of a drug development process. So first one is the discovery and development, second one is the preclinical research, and third the clinical development, the fourth FDA review, and fifth one is the post-marketing, that is the post-marketing monitoring. And if we see the second phase, what we are going to discuss, the preclinical research. So what is a preclinical research? In a simple word, as I mentioned, it is done in animals. So the research is done in animals. So what is the need for a research to be done in animals? As I mentioned, it may establish a rationale for conducting the clinical trial. So when a research is done in animals, it may be helpful for performing an in vitro test or an in vivo test to determine the efficacy and to know the mechanism of action on the cell organelles or on the molecules, and it will be helpful for knowing the toxicology test and the potency test, and then the further process of the regulatory aspects in filling and all. And next, coming to the animal ethics. So nowadays, there's a slide you can see with the image which I have shown. Both animals and humans are treated as one. So that is the image which is shown. And if you see in this image, so what is the rights, the respect is given to the animals. So we say that animal ethics is that examines the human-animal relationships, the moral consideration of animal, and how the non-human animals ought to be treated. So we call animals as non-human animals. So when we were to use ethics in different disciplines, so they frame some rules, whether it is a right or wrong, and they frame some regulations. They have some ethics in research, some different types of moral principles, how they practice this ethics, and what is their code of conduct. And it is based whether it's good or bad based on the type of activity where it is been involved. So therefore, in ethics, so what are the major things to be known? What is the rights of the animal? So normally we see the animal rights and ethics, they overlap each other. And what is the animal welfare? And what is the animal law and animal cognition? Wildlife conservation, moral status of non-human animals, and history of moral use. And then coming to make a differentiation between the animal rights and ethics, as I said, they overlap basically, but I can say with the 2 examples. A practical pursuit applying mortality to everyday situation. Yeah, where whatever the things we are using nowadays for the purpose of the food, we used to sacrifice the animals. So that is the mortality. And ethics, an academic field asking, how can we should treat the animals? So they are doctrine advocating rights for animals. So attempt to resolve the animal-human issues with number of approaches. So therefore, the mortality is the practical ethics and ethics is a theoretical mortality. So we all know that we all live in the animal holocaust. So that is every day worldwide, so many number of animals have been killed for the purpose of production, food production, or for some other research purpose. So why we should carry the animal research? So there are plenty of pros and cons also. Let's see what are the advantages. So in a simple sentence to say, the animal research is for science. The animal research is for science. So the first I can say some few things I've quoted here. For scientific research, we can say for a positive or for a negative scientific research for the advancement of a knowledge. Second one in academics, if you take, so these animals have been used as a model. Animals have been used as a model in human anatomy and physiology, and a model to study disease, and also to develop medical treatments, what we are following now, and to determine the toxicity of medications. So the safety pharmacology is considered to be important, as well as the toxicity of the medications also considered to be important. So therefore, we can say this animal research is not only safety to human, it is also safety to animal as well as the environment. So therefore, the three things are most important. Benefited is human, animal, and the environment. However, if you see, as I mentioned to you, various number of animals are used in research. So as a basic researcher, so we can divide the animals into small animals and large animals. So small animals, normally we use rat, mouse, guinea pig, and rabbit. Larger animals, we may go with dog, monkeys, pigs, like that. So all these animals are definitely benefited for the human, animals, as well as and the environment. So for example, just I can quote a single rat and mouse, still they are being used in the cancer research and metabolic disease. The rabbit, as I said, for this COVID-19 pandemic era, so they have been tested for the vaccine. And for example, your dog is used for the cardiovascular research. The cow and horse also used for vaccine development. So like that, there are plenty of animals have been used for the plenty of research. So how this animal research come into existence? So coming to history, I think yesterday's speaker has given a elaborative introduction about the history of animal research to highlight. So if we see in a book called Circa in 500 BC itself, the dissection of live animals have been taken place. It has been recorded there. And the importance of those animals were they were discovering the functions of living organisms, and few members disagreed and few members agreed. And one of the scientists, you can see Theophrastus, so he was objecting or disagreeing for the discovery of function of living organisms only through humans. It can be abducted from the vivisection of animals also. And you can see a vivisection which is performed on a dog pointed by Emil Edward Mouchy in 1832. So that means from 1832 they were been using the animals. And you all know that about the Gallo-Roman fission, and a philosopher. So he has performed with the animal vivisection, and he has developed the theories in physiology, pathology, and pharmacology. A French philosopher, René Descartes, so he coined the word automata. Animal also do not feel pain. So comparing to the humans. And then the William Harvey, the fission, English fission should be remembered always. So he only discovered that the heart and not the lungs circulated blood throughout the body. So previously they thought a lung is responsible for the circulation, but he only discovered the heart. So like that, they have carried the vivisection, and the same if we see in the 19th century and early, the anti-vivisection group, they performed And the ethical benefits have been explained by a scientist, French physiologist Claude Bernard. And if you see the Queen Victoria, so she has passed an anti-vivisection campaign, a Cruelty to Animals Act in 1876. And Ivan Pavlov, he demonstrated the conditioned reflex by training dogs. So we all know that the conditioned reflex, once they put the bell, so what happened, the animal, the salivation stimuli has been responding, and then you can see that is the time for the animal to eat. So that is called a conditioned reflex. So all these were being carried out. And in 1959, due to some, you can say some historical events which have been happened without using the animals. So then the scientists, they have introduced the principles of humane experimental technique by zoologist William Russell and a microbiologist Rex Perch, where the term coined 3RS. Still, we are following it. So, what are the three historical landmarks we will see? So, before that, what are the types of preclinical studies? So, we generally define we are doing animal studies. So, there are different types of animal studies. For example, we can say a simple screening test. We don't know what study to be done. So, a pharmacodynamic study, for example, to know the analgesic activity of a new drug. It is called a simple screening test. Sometimes we perform the study with the isolated organs and bacterial cultures, so to know the antibacterial activity or antihistaminic activity. Sometimes we go specifically test on the animal models which has been already evolved. So, for example, you can go with a diabetes model with alloxor STZ induced model. So, those are specific for diabetes. Another is general observation test. So, normally the drug has been existing. So, we carry with the trial tripling dose, 3 dose levels in the mouse. We call functional observation test mainly for the CNS. And next you go with the confirmatory test to confirm once again with the analog activities. For example, you want to confirm it is having anti-inflammatory activity or not. So you go with a specific anti-inflammatory activity test. And then some specifically you go with the mechanism of action. For example, if you take an antihypertensive drug, we know that this antihypertensive drug, they act through different mechanisms. For example, through the calcium channel or through the ACE enzyme or through the AT receptors. So we can specifically target what type of mechanism of action. Next type of study, it is systemic pharmacology, either it is CVS or NS, nervous system. Sometimes we may perform through the quantitative test, that is already existing drug versus a new drugs. So normally we carry the bioassay of drugs by using the isolated organs, so you can able to compare it. And pharmacokinetics also can be done specifically, as I mentioned, the rabbits have been used to know the absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion. It may be helpful for knowing the route of administration also. And finally, we go for a toxicity test, either acute, subacute. We use the term short-term and long-term tests. So these are some of the few types of animal studies we can say, but there is no specific types. We can just say these are the various types. And whenever coming to these animal studies, as I said, the first one is the animal welfare. The 5 freedom of animal welfare has been considered. So it was coined by Britain's Farm Animal Welfare Council in 1965. The first freedom is freedom from hunger and thirst. The second, freedom from discomfort. And third is freedom from pain, injury and disease. And fourth one, the freedom to express normal behavior. And freedom from fear and distress. So we know these are the 5 freedoms. How we are going to provide these 5 freedoms for the animals? So by giving a proper food, fed with a pellet diet based on the animal, providing a palatable water, and discomfort, giving them a proper animal husbandry, and giving a proper, for example, the pain analgesics, or we can go for knowing the microbial status of the animal, it will be helpful from free from injury or disease, and giving them a sufficient space in the animal husbandry for their normal behavior and fear and distress. So these 5 freedoms of the animal welfare are considered. So whenever you are applying for a research proposal. And as I mentioned, what are the animal research or ethical questions? As I told you, a dilemma of saving either an animal or a human, as I told you. So whenever we frame this, the ethical question is raised. What are the substantial benefits associated with research involving animals? And you should justify it. Second one, if you say, can any use of animals by humans to be justified? So you have to give a proper justification. And what are the specific issues need to be considered in the context of research? Or whether unavailability of alternatives. So nowadays I said for academics, we go with alternatives, but in research, other than animals, whether any alternatives are there. And how are you going to justify the animal research in other uses such as food production? And what is the appropriate role of regulation for research involving the animals? So still these ethical questions are always being raised, and it is a need to be answered by the scientist or the principal investigator. See, here you can see some of the morally relevant features and factors to be considered. So first one is the sentience. So we know that we all are having the feeling of pain. Not only we, as I said, non-human animals. So they are also having the feeling of pain. So the sentience is to be considered. And a higher cognitive capacities. So it is the capable of the animal to think. It is the capacity of the animal to think. Or you can say that we are able to complete some task due to the higher cognitive brain. And the third one is the capacity to flourish, to satisfy the species specific needs. Sociability, so that is to be a member in a community, social community. Possession of life, the respect, the value to the life. And then coming to some of the factors you can see to be considered. The first factor is most important. What are the goals of research? What are the goals? So the first thing, what are you going to achieve? And the second factor is slightly, what is the probability of success? And third one, which animals are to be used? And what is the effect on the animals used? So we should know, here the effect means the human endpoints. So that should be a separate topic to be discussed. The human endpoints are considered to be more important nowadays in the preclinical research. And are there any alternatives? So these factors are to be considered in a animal research. And as I told you, there are different pros and cons. If we see some of the pros, we say directly it's benefit for humans. And the cons, they say it is an expensive procedure or a painful procedure. And always we quote, the humans and animals are identical, not reliability. Okay, safety of products. So always we do to know the safety. And we say animals are poor subjects. And we say it is cost effective, animals are benefited. And the cons, you can say the Animal Welfare Act to be considered, the alternatives, and some of the unnecessary tests. And always the animal research will not stop. We end with the conclusion with the further studies. So it goes like that. So knowing all those things, the ethical questions, the morally relevant factors and features, you should know always, a basic research scientist, the origins of predictive animal testing, the 3 cases, which is unforgettable, which has been happened, why there is a need of animal research. So the first one is the Lash Lear case in 1913 US. The untested eyelash dye containing paraphenylene diamine, that is aniline, when it was tested, it was causing a total blindness at least in one of the person. So this was that advertisement which has been given. So it is a cosmeceuticals where they were applying. It was used, and you can see the redness, ulceration, and total blindness. I mean to say it has been not checked directly in an animal. So that is one of the disaster. And the second disaster, you see the tragedy with the elixir, sulfanilamide, which is dissolved in a ethylene glycol, where you can see more than 170 people died. Because this ethylene glycol, when it enters the body, it is converted into oxalic acid. This oxalic acid forms the crystals, mainly in the kidney, and it causes the nephrotoxicity or the kidney failure. This is the second tragedy. And the third tragedy nobody will forget. As I mentioned to you, in 1959, they started introducing the 3RS. The thalidomide tragedy, nobody will be forget it, because in 1957, a German pharmaceutical company, Grunenthal, a risk-free sedative designed to combat morning sickness in pregnant women. So you know that women, they out limbs, and you can see the image. Tragedy always the Lashlier case, the elixir case, and the thalidomide tragedy. So this has brought a revolution in the animal research. But still, they've coined the word 3RS. It is not the meaning that continuously the animal to be stopped. It is been continued, but modified use of the animals. So as I mentioned, Russell and Birch in 1959, they proposed that if animals were to be used in experiments, every effort should be made to replace them with non-sentient animals. So I have highlighted between a sentience and a non-sentience. So sentience animals, they're having a feelings. And non-sentience, so such as your tea leaves, carrots, they do not have the feeling of pain. So that is the difference between a sentience and a non-sentience alternatives. So what do you mean by 3RS? Just let me go through it quickly. So the order of this 3RS is also important in animal testing. So this 3RS in animal testing, however, nowadays a fourth R is also been introduced, that is called rehabilitation or responsibility. So the first R is replacement, methods which avoid or replace the use of animals. Second one is methods which minimize the number of animals used per experiment. Third one, methods which minimize the suffering and improve the animal welfare. So replacement, what we are following today in the profession, in academic profession, reduction in the animal research, and refinement also in the animal research. So to highlight, for example, replacement, I can go directly. So nowadays, we are replacing the live animals from 2015 onwards with the dummies for teaching and dissection purpose. And we use the word as call techniques, computer assisted learning techniques, by using some simulation methods and some in vitro methods such as use cell culture and tissue culture. So that is the replacement. And coming to reduction, so instead of going for a more number of animals, they say they perform with pilot studies with minimum number of animals, and also to perform the crossover study using the own control for the test. And always they say consult with a statistician before grouping of the animals, and we should try to minimize the variables such as diet, disease, stress, and appropriate species we should be used, because every species is not unique. They are having their individual identity for individual diseases and disorders. And finally, the refinement is considered to be more important nowadays. The husbandry needs as per the species requirement. So many number of species can be kept in an animal house, and the husbandry may vary for them. try to refine the experimental procedures by using analgesics, anesthetics, and euthanasia. And refining the human endpoints are considered to be very important. So these are the 3Rs. If you see, there is a separate center for 3Rs, National Center for 3Rs, where they provide the updated information regarding the alternative methods. If you see, recently in April, they have prepared an alternative methods for advancing cardiovascular science with 3Rs method with BHF, British Heart Foundation, and UK, for developing some different methods such as human umbilical arteries or in vitro occlusion clot formation is being designed. So if you go through this website, you'll be having a sufficient knowledge about all the updated 3Rs procedures. And coming to the global scenario, so why the ethical guidelines sometimes to be followed? You can see of various test substances or species to be easily compared. So it can be easily compared. And if somewhere a study has been done and it need not be repeated, that is more important. Waste of lives of animals as well as finance infrastructure. And it may also helpful to facilitate the work of those who design and carry out tests. So that's why the reasons for developing the guidelines. Some of the guidelines with the whole animal testing is FDA guidelines, and the most guideline which is used for toxicity testing throughout worldwide is OECD guidelines, and the other guidelines also pesticide assessment guidelines. All are involving the whole animals. And if you're coming to the another few guidelines such as CPCSCA. So this is the guideline which is being used in our India. Let me show how it has been introduced. And there is another guideline called CARE, Community on Animal Research and Ethics by Washington. And another which is found by INSA, India, that is Guidelines for Care and Use of Animals. And in Singapore, if we see, that is called NACLAR, and UN is APA. In Australia, NHMRC. That means individual countries, they have their individual guidelines for the animal care and the welfare to be followed during a research. So to some of the regulatory guidelines for toxicity studies, as I told you, that is one is the OECD, that is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So for any toxicity studies, if you go to the website, you'll be having all the details. For example, if you see in your 6th semester pharmacology, there is a topic called Principles of Toxicology, where you go about the acute, subacute, and toxicity studies, the principles and basic considerations. So you will be getting the answer from there directly. And then coming to the International Conference on Harmonization, that is the Quality, Safety, Efficacy, and Multidisciplinary, that is ICH. And you may follow the EPA, that is the Environmental Protection Agency. And India, you know that we are following the Schedule Y, which was established by Drugs and Cosmetic Act 1945, that is CDSCO, a Central Drug Standard Control Organization. So these are some of the guidelines. And if you see how in India we have come to the CPC guidelines, you should know the basics. 1960, the act was passed for PCA, that is the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And it was amended in 82, and in 1964 itself they started this CPCSCA, that is the Committee for the Purpose of Control and Supervision of Experimental Animals. Then 1972 Wildlife Protection Act, 1992, as I told you, the INSA guidelines, and 1998, this era was important, where they've introduced one rule, that is by CPCSCA, that is breeding of and experiments on animals, control and supervision. So what current guideline we are following for the laboratory animal facility or the research, where we get approval for small animals or for large animals, is by this 1998, this rules. But however, if we see in 2001, we have framed ICMR guidelines also separately for medical colleges. And in 2009 itself, MC amended recommendations to use alternatives. If we see in medical pharmacology, there is a subject called medical pharmacology also in MCA, where they were using previously some animals. Now they're going with the simulated software. Then MHFW, the bans use of educational institutions. And 2013, where the UGC declared guidelines for discontinuation of dissection and animal experimentation in zoology or life science in a phased manner. Slowly they brought. And if you see in 2015, PCA amendments recommends to use alternative to replace animal experiments. So now the question here asked, what are the various alternatives available for performing the experiments for the academics? So there are plenty of softwares which are available where we can perform for the B.Pharm or pharmacy curriculum. And I think the yesterday speaker, Dr. Praveen, he has spoken about the various other alternative methods which are available in the current practice. And some of the CPC guidelines for laboratory animal facility, as I mentioned to you, if you directly go into the website, so nowadays you see that the ministry has been changing. It comes under the Ministry of Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying, Department of Husbandry and Dairying Product. In that, if you're going for the guidelines, there is an updated guideline which is called Compendium of CPC SCA. So in this Compendium, which is updated in 2015 and printed in 2018, there is some CPC guidelines for laboratory animal facility. So I'm going to discuss some few important things, some key perspectives of this guideline. So this is the history of how it has been evolved. As I mentioned to you, first the PC Act, then CPC-SCA. So what is the main motto of CPC-SCA if you see? The animals are not subjected to unnecessary pain or suffering, either before, during, or after the performance of the experiment. That's why I said there is an updation of this guideline. If you see, 3 days back also, there was updation in Form B. The clause 9 and 12 has also been updated. So the updated guideline is always important in a preclinical research. So the objective is to eliminate the potential for conflict, and it was considered necessary to examine the international norms regarding the use of animals. So always update regulations, streamline and simplify the procedures while ensuring the ethical use of animals. The main aim of these guidelines is to ensure humane and ethical treatment of animals. So what are the functions of the CPC-SCA? So just highlighting, it is for the registration of an establishment, a selection and appointment of nominees. So if you see in individual institution, there is a committee called Institutional Animal Ethics Committee. So the nominees are appointed by the head office, CPC-SCA. And the CPC-SCA, they give the approval for the animal house facilities, permission to conduct experiments involving use of animals. So small animals, the IAC committee can approve. But if you're going for larger animals, based on the facility it is available, the IAC can only recommend, but it can be approved only by the CPC-SCA. And also recommendation for the import of animals for use in experiments. And finally, if any action against establishment in case of violation of any legal normal stipulation. And always keep in your mind, in Indian CPC guidelines, there are 5 ethical principles has been adopted for the use of animals in scientific experiment. So the first one is, if you see, why we have to perform the experiment on animals. So there should be a proper goal, as I told you. It may be carried for the purpose of advancement by new discovery of a physiological knowledge, or it may save or prolong the human life, or alleviating suffering, the well-being of the people of the country, for combating any disease, whether human beings, animals, or plants. So that is the importance of principle 1, why we are performing experiments on animals. So we want a proper justification. Second, and principle 2, as I told you, whenever you are performing the experiment on animals, the animals of lowest on the phylogenetic scale with the least degree of sentience, which may give scientifically valid results. For example, I have just shown the invertebrates and vertebrates based on sensation of pain. That is your degree of sentience. So when any models are available, so you should perform based on this least degree of sentience. That is important. And principle 3, whenever we are performing this study with the animals, try to avoid or minimize a feeling of pain and suffering inflicted on animals, and you should issue of the priority for research personnel. And in those cases, scientific procedures, you should be performed with appropriate sedation, analgesia, or anesthesia. So that is principle 3. We should use the management of pain with sedation or analgesia, anesthesia. And principle 4 is most important. The persons engaged in animal experimentation should have a moral responsibility for the welfare of the animals. So moral responsibility, and the investigators are responsible for aftercare and rehabilitation of experiments, and they're permitted to euthanize. So you call euthanasia. So they should know the human endpoints, and they should use an euthanasia based upon the following situation it is been mentioned. And principle 5, if you see the living condition of animals is very important. I have told you the 5 degrees of freedom. So it should be appropriate for their species and contribute to their health and comfort, the housing, feeding, and care for all. So that is most important. To summarize these 5 principles, guys, the principle 1 is the experiment on animals. Why we should perform the experiment on animals? Principle 2, the animals lowest on the phylogenetic scale. Principle 3, I say the principle 2 is from invertebrates to vertebrates. Principle 3, the proper use of animals and avoidance, we say the management or the minimization of pain and suffering by using the anesthetics, anesthesia, and sedations. Principle 4, the moral responsibility, the welfare of the animals, the living conditions of the animals to be considered. We may use the euthanasia based on situation. And 5 is the living conditions of the animals to be considered. So these are the 5 ethical principles should be known as such from the CPCA guidelines followed in India for use of animals in research. So now coming to the CPC guidelines for laboratory animal facilities. So there are some more points to be discussed here. Let me go with some of the highlighting key perspective points. So starting with the goal. What is this CPC guidelines? We all know the nation of our country. You quoted so many times. The greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. So the way the animals are treated. So the first goal may be to promote the human care of animals, and the basic objective is the advancement of biological knowledge that is relevant to humans and animals. So every experiment on animals we are going for any advancement. Second, the most important thing is the veterinary care. So nowadays, as per CPC guidelines, they made a full-time veterinarian is compulsory. So its importance is the daily observation on the animals. Say there are cage side observations, or you call the micro environment or the macro environment important. Next, if you see the animal procurement, if animals are there, the mouse is the most. So normally the animal house have been given license either basic education and research, or breeding, or for trade, or for commercial. So normally in the academics, they'll go for basic education and research. And if they want to breed also, they can use the breeder license. So whenever you are procuring the animal, you see that you're obtaining from a registered breeders. And for importing, it may be getting a license from DGFT, mainly for the beagle dogs. That's what I mentioned there. And whenever you're bringing the new animals inside your animal house facility, the quarantine, stabilization, and separation is considered to be important. The microbial status of the newly received animal. For example, if you take a small animal, it is 1 week, and for a larger animal, it is 6 weeks. And the stabilization, you should know the physiological, psychological, and nutritional stabilization also. And if any animal is found to be sick, so you should try to separate them and prevent the interspecies disease transmission and to eliminate the anxiety. So that anxiety is one of the important things to be known. And the surveillance, diagnosis, treatment, and control of disease. So nowadays, surveillance takes place not only for the animal house facility, in every place. So that will be useful for observing the signs of illness, injury, or abnormal behavior by the animal house staff. And we know that we can give vaccination for those animals when it's observed by a veterinarian. And if the animals are suffering from contagious disease, they can be isolated from healthy animals in the colony. And personal hygiene, nowadays you know that COVID-19, how whenever we are allowed to move outside, for a normal person we use the face mask. So inside of the animal house, a high standard personal cleanliness and no food or drink inside. So we should follow the personal hygiene. And location of animal house facility, if you see, it can be a separate building or it can be within a building with a separate floor. If you see, the about 50 to 60% of the total constructed area it should occupy. And if you're coming to the functional areas, there should be separation for species or isolation of individual projects when necessary. So all this functional area is based upon the management and their need of research and their need of study. They can have all the facilities starting from food, bedding, administration, showers, links. So if you see the sketch, they may have a separate corridor, a dirty corridor or a clean corridor, and separate rooms for whatever the species they are going to house. It may be in case of unidirectional or it may be in the bidirectional. And anesthesia, as per CPC guidelines, they mention some anesthesia we should follow. It is used to control a pain or distress under experiment. You should have a normal carbon dioxide chamber. And euthanasia is said a painless killing or a merciless killing. And we should follow as per the guidelines and we should maintain a record. So euthanasia is thrice to 5 times a dose of anesthesia. And these are some of the physical facility to be maintained. It is given clearly in the guidelines. So what all to be maintained to highlight: building material should be moist proof, fire resistant. Corridor, it should be wide enough to facilitate the movement of personnel. Utilities such as water line, drain pipes, electrical connection. Animal room doors should be rust, vermin and dust proof. Floors should be smooth, moisture proof, non-absorbent, capable of supporting racks and equipments. And then you can see that drains, walls and ceiling should be free of cracks, and storage areas separately for feed, bedding, cages, and facilities for sanitizing the equipment and supplies, and a separate experimental area where it should be kept. And animal husbandry, I showed for a small animal husbandry, the cage where they have to maintain adequate ventilation. It should maintain the biological need of an animal. This is for either a mouse or a rat cage made up of steel or a painted steel. So the importance is maintaining the good health of the animals. It should be easily accessible for filling, changing, cleaning, or servicing. So based upon the species of the animal, it should be provided. And food, I already mentioned to you, it should be palatable, non-contaminated, heavy metals, and environment, the temperature, relative humidity, power and lighting, and noise control. So normally we have a humidity chamber which is being placed in an animal house, So you can record it. Moreover, all the species, they have to maintain the temperature that is maintained the small, either mouse or rat within the range. And then coming to bedding, it is once again, it should be absorbent, free of toxic chemicals. And normally we use a PADIAS. It is based on the type of research and the facility you have. You can go wood chips, and it should be sterilized before use. And fresh, potable, and uncontaminated water should be. And next, coming with waste disposal, previously they said everything should be incinerated. But, there are so many issues with the incineration, getting approval from the municipality, or, to avoid pollution, air pollution. So nowadays they go with the biomedical waste management. So we have to get the approval, at least the license for 1 year, and it should be kept separately whenever need. It can be collected. It may be black, red, blue, green. So it is mentioned what specification it should be kept. Moreover, it is kept in a hospital also. You call it as biomedical waste disposal. And then you should always have a program to design the pest control to eliminate the presence of infestations by the pest. And there is no weekend holiday. So all the days should be worked in an animal house. So a qualified personnel by alternative duty should work, and an emergency veterinary care number should be available. And record keeping, all types of record relevant with the animal house. For example, plan, staff record, SOPs, breeding, minutes of the institutional limits committee, number of animal use, death record, sick record, water analysis report. So all should be available with their archives. So this should be shown during the time of inspection. And the different equipments or the different facility what we are going to study, it should be maintained with the SOP, standard operating procedure for the particular lab within the facility. For example, name of the author, title of the SOP, what is the date, what is the location, their objective. So normally if you see the normal animal house, we may have the normal value of all the parameters, the hematological or the biochemical parameters. An animal care and technical person, that is the other than the veterinarian, if you see, a person who has been trained in an animal house facility, you should undergo a program, normally a 1 week program, which is been given in the annexure, where he will be studying about how to maintain the animals, what is the behavior of the animals and all. And transport of laboratory animals, as I told you, the 3 mode of transport, different containers are being used based on the animal density, and we have to check for the food and water during transit, and protection from transit infections, injuries and stress. And it can be taken through a rail or a air based upon the need of mode of travel, and it should be more comfortable for the movement protection and prevention from the injuries. Just I have highlighted some few images where they have been transported, and sometimes injuries can be avoided by reducing the space. So we can take a minimum number of animals and the size of the cage, adequate food and water to avoid overcrowding and infighting, which is given in the annexure 4. And if you see what not I have discussed the CPC guidelines, there are some 8 annexures are present. The 1 is with the hematological data, the 2 is with the biochemical data, and 3A to G is the floor area, number of animals to be kept calculated based upon the weight and the size and the floor area, either for the different types of animals. And if you see the 4 and 5, that is for the transport, as I mentioned, the annexure 4, transport by either road, rail and air. And 5 is for the anesthetic agents for laboratory animals, 6 is for euthanasia. So, and 7th is the qualification and knowledge required for laboratory attendant, and 8th in the institutional biosafety committee. So whenever we are involving with some hazardous agents, so we have to get the approval from IBC first, and then the progress comes to the IAC. So if you see in all these annexures, they mentioned some limits of all the parameters and or types of chemicals, that is anesthesia, euthanasia, to be used. However, these mentioned annexures are comparable with that of the international standard. They're comparable with that of the international standard guidelines which has been used. And just have given all the reference, that is the annexures. For example, the hematological data of common laboratory animals, the various data is kept. That means whenever the animals come for a quarantine, so these annexure 1 and annexure 2 to be considered. And more specifically, it may vary from species to species. You should keep in the mind. Annexure 3 with the minimum floor, how you're going to calculate based upon the size of the cage. So 3C, 3D, E, F. As I mentioned to you, you can see whatever the animal you want to keep, you can follow the occasions. So normally we don't use cats, dogs, or other animals. That is used only in a research, big research laboratory. For normal academic, for research with a PG and a PhD, we go with the small laboratory animals. And these are the things, how many number of animals can be transported by a road, rail, and air. Transport of animals, as I mentioned. And these are some of the anesthetic agents which are being used. That is the annexure 6. So nowadays, getting an anesthetic agents from a medical shop is not so easy. And that is different types of anesthetics, inhalation and intravenous anesthetics. And sometimes you go with a cocktail with ketamine and xylazine. And euthanasia of laboratory animals also, as I told. Some days we are not following the physical methods. Normally it is not recommended. We go only with the chemical method. They given the cervical dislocation is a physical method. It is based upon that animal weight is less than 200 grams. And these are the different types of methods which have been followed previously, not nowadays. And this is the qualification of a knowledge required for a laboratory attendant. As I told you, you should undergo 1 week or a 2-week training with Central Institute like CFTRI or CSIR. And this is the Institutional Biosafety Committee. Any chemical or any microorganism is hazardous, so we have to perform and get approval from here, and then only it comes to the animal studies with the IAC. So these are the various annexures. 8 annexures, keep in your mind, for the CPC guidelines to be followed. And coming to a conclusion, to put in a simple word, the animals say that I can't speak for myself, you are my voice. So we humans, so always while involving research with animals, we should treat animals as animals, not as an animals. Okay, treat them as living beings. That's why I said non-humans, and that's what. And finally, I would like to thank all of you and thank all the animal ethics guidelines which have been taken. All the disclaimer against it is exclusively from the guidelines from the source of CPC-SCA and various guidelines taken from the Google. So that is about the ethical guideline globally and with the Indian scenario. And if you are having any clarifications, you can ask. I'm ready to answer.
So thank you so much. You have ended the presentation on a very note by saying that animals should not be treated as animals, rather they should be treated as living beings. So this is one thing which everybody should keep in consideration while going for any sort of animal research. You also talked about why animal research is conducted and how in current scenario the rabbit is being tested for coronavirus vaccination. We also got to know about the regulatory guidelines for conducting toxicity studies. So, sir, thank you so much for taking us through such an insightful session. And moving to the Q&A round, we have received certain questions from the audience. So if you allow me, sir, I can go ahead with the first question.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
so the
sure.
first question we have from Dr. Pinky, and she's writing that in current scenario, if it is possible to replace sentiment with non-sentiment, so could it give better results?
Yeah, it's not sentiment, it is sentience.
Okay.
The sentience means, okay, the feeling of pain.
Right.
For a simple example, I am pinching myself, I am feeling my pain. You are pinching an animal, the animal is having the pain, but you are using for example, a tea leaf or a carrot or a vegetable, you will not feel the pain. Okay? When there are models, for example, there are in vitro models, for example, for a DNA or RNA determination by uses. You can go with that by using a carrot or a potato. You don't need to carry animal liver or a kidney. So the results matters, but for the animal research, we have to see if alternatives are there. We have to go with the alternatives. So that is
Right,
important.
sir. Right, sir. True, sir. So moving on to the next question. The next question given by Dr. Ajay Kumar, and he basically wants to have your opinion on something which he has written. And he has written that how much is it relevant to use animal in screening procedure when we can use other far suitable methods available like cell lines, microbial cell, and in silica approach. Researchers in India continent use animals in screening procedure, which in his opinion must be restricted to validation and afterward. So, sir, what is your opinion on this?
Okay, fine. So now if you see on my experience, okay, whenever you go with in silico, okay, you are using a computer assisted learning technique, you are having a plenty of protein bank, and it is only an assumption that this drug may go and bind with this ligand or a receptor. Okay. And then if you are doing some in vitro method with cell lines, it may give us 25% of your result. But any study which is not ending with the animal study, as an animal researcher, I say it is
Right.
still cons, but in some physiologically, the animals are similar with that of the human. We have to follow some strict ethical guidelines after going with in silico, in vitro. A complete result will be obtained after ending with the animal studies. That's what the drug development process still is right now in global scenario.
True, sir. So, sir, moving on to the next question. The next question is given by Dr. Reena Purohit. And Dr. Reena Purohit asked that what is the preclinical toxicology and how is the toxicity done? Okay, so we can see Dr. Vadivalan back on the screen. Welcome back again, sir. Yeah. Okay, so, sir, I'd like to again continue with the question as you have already covered.
Yeah, fine.
It's been asked by Dr. Reena Purohit, and she asked that what is preclinical toxicology and how toxicity is done.
So if you're coming to preclinical toxicology, so this is a separate field where you have to, before knowing the efficacy of the drug in the animals, to know its toxic effect on the animal, we carry with a limit dose as per the OECD guidelines. There are different guidelines to be carried. For example, if you are going for a acute oral toxicity studies, there are guidelines such as 420, 423, 425. And then we can go with the subacute, and then we can go for a chronic toxicity studies. So once you know your new drug is having some efficacy or potency, then before going for a safety pharmacology, it is essential for you to carry the toxicity study. So that's what I highlighted, the regulatory toxicology OECD guidelines.
Right, sir. Right, sir. So, sir, I think with this we'll end the session, Q&A session, and
Okay.
I'd like to thank you on behalf of entire team of Maharana Pratap College of Pharmacy for taking us time today and addressing our faculties and research scholars on various aspects of animal testing. It has been so kind of you to join us today, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Convey my
Have a
regards
nice
to all
day.
the members. Fine.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So now I take the privilege of introducing our next key speaker for the session, Dr. Tejal Mehta. Dr. Tejal Mehta is presently working as professor and head in Department of Pharmaceutics, Birla University, Ahmedabad. Dr. Tejal Mehta has 21 years teaching experience and 16 years of research experience. Her area of research is dissolution enhancement of sparingly soluble solutions, drugs, and formulation development of conventional and novel drug delivery systems. She has published more than 70 research papers in journals of national and international repute. Dr. Teja Mehta has also presented several papers in national and international conferences. She has authored a chapter in a multi-authored book on novel drug delivery systems. Madam has received Best Paper Award 2004 from Association of Pharmaceutical Teachers of India for publishing paper in Indian Journal of Pharmaceutical Education. She has also received R.V. Patil Best MPharm Thesis Award in the Guide category. She has also authored the book Practical Manual of Pharmaceutical Engineering and Practical Manual of Pharmaceutical Dosage Forms. Dr. Teja Mehta has filed 3 patents related to her research. She is a reviewer of national and international journals in the research area of pharmaceutics and drug delivery. Dr. Teja Mehta is a life member of APTI and Society of Pharmacovigilance of India. With this, I invite Dr. Teja Mehta for the plenary talk on the topic Transforming Traditional Pharmaceutical Education, giving part towards digital pedagogy during and post-COVID pandemic. Welcome, Dr. Teja Mehta.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yeah, very much, ma'am.
Yeah, just hello.
Hello, ma'am. We can hear you, and your presentation is also could be seen on the screen, ma'am. You can go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah.
Right.
So first of all, thank you very much to the organizer of Maharana Pratap College of Pharmacy for inviting me for this particular seminar. It is a need of this seminar is a really need because we all are in the COVID-19 pandemic. Actually, I tried here looking to the title of the seminar. I tried to take some of my experience of using this digital education in the case of pharmaceuticals. I'm basically from the pharmaceutics, so take a certain examples of that how a digital pedagogy can be useful to us in this pandemic and even after also. So we all know that this COVID-19 had changed many things. There are many students because of which this COVID-19 and social distancing have a problem of education. But as because of this online education, it become possible at least to complete a syllabus, to conduct the exam, and we could continue our routine. And that is why we should. But however, there are certain issues related to use of various technology. So even though we are not the expert of computers, but being a teacher or being a student even sometimes, we should know about certain tools and technology which is useful to us to make our teaching effective. Because it may happen that we may effective in teaching in our classroom, but because of a lack knowledge of this digital pedagogy, we could not be that much effective. And that is why we require to utilize all those. My presentation will be to take you towards the how the teaching methodology from traditional to the this online teaching will helpful to you. So we all know that people are using this board and chalk method since a long. It is not like that we all have used this online teaching today only. The online teaching we were using, some pedagogy we were using, but not in this way which we are using today. So if we think about board and chalk method, the major disadvantages, okay, the lecture once completed, cannot be attended again. But in case of online, the student can, if you put your recording and everything, student can again keep your lecture on and can read. And the board and chalk is very monotonous method, and today's students are not accepting this method. Plus, it is less interactive, very teacher-centered, and time-consuming. So, there is a transition required to move towards from that particular method. If we say earlier people use chalk and board, then some modification occur where some smart board came or some marker and board came. Then afterwards, people are going for CU online type of the technology, and now we move towards totally on the e-learning, where we use total all e-platforms. We use e-platforms and we teach also e-platforms. What is this digital methods of the teaching? So we use various. I can say that you can divide in two ways. One is a synchronous, and is asynchronous. What do you mean by synchronous? Synchronous means where students are with you in an online mode, and asynchronous where you put everything. A student, when they will get a time, they will utilize those platforms and can, and on their convenience, can utilize this. So this Google Meet, Moodle, LMS, this all are the online digital platforms. Even people use Webex. Today you are using another platform. So we can use various digital platforms where you can conduct the classes. But each platform has its own, characteristics, advantage, requirement, and disadvantage. So what I feel is we cannot require to use or know every platform, but at least those platforms which we want to utilize, we should know that platform. Otherwise, today, suppose I said where there is a sharing, if I will take half an hour, my time will be wasted, and student will also be disinterested once if time is wasted. So I should know each platform, at least those platforms which we use. Again, I can divide it in two ways. One is synchronous, asynchronous. Again, in that also, the some are used for teaching, some are used for assessment. So there are different platforms used for teaching as well as assessment. So content delivery, when you prepare yourself for online teaching and when you prepare yourself for classroom teaching, there is a huge difference. In classroom teaching, you can just go for anything you utilize when you are using PowerPoint in the classroom teaching also. But when you are going for digital teaching, you don't know when it is very difficult to control. Suppose you large class, to control all 100 students is very very difficult in case of 100 students. So at that time you require to utilize various modes so that you remain interactive. For making them interactive, you can utilize some polls. You can go for, suppose I say in first 10 minutes about execution, how I am going to conduct a lecture for that topic, how many sessions will be there, and then what I will do is I will go for some video to be shown, like 10-minute video or 20-minute video or some minutes video I will show, so that, and then give a pose of questions. I can keep a 3-4 pose between my lecture so that student will not be disoriented. So this is very very important when you go for online teaching to keep your students engaged and to keep students with you. You require to use various modes. Again, whatever I am telling, it may not be always a solution for each course. As a course coordinator or as a teacher of that course, we have to devise a methodology. In which methodology I mean, so that my learning will be effective. So you can use the different platforms for that particular. For example, I may go for using smart PowerPoints, or I may use certain animations, I may use certain micro videos, or I may use certain live sections. Or you can use different modes of this teaching pedagogies like smart PowerPoints, animations, use of videos. Sometimes we can go for some live session, like we can click, like when I'm teaching my students, I can click on certain websites, show them certain live sessions, so that, and then correlate my theory with that. So it depends upon the course coordinator what kind of totality they have to use for their particular course. See, basic our aim is given by digital way also. We want that our teaching will be effective, and for doing this particular, we require to use a combinations of teaching approaches and pedagogy. Coming to the advantages of this online teaching, see, in general, what I can say is, okay, of course, we have used this online teaching because of this COVID-19. Of course, the interaction and link with the student is a biggest disadvantage. But some advantage is, at least in this era where the social distance is a difficult, at that time we can at least connect with our student. We can work. Even this will also help the student to attend from anywhere. You can attend your course. It also a student-centered teaching approach will be used. Even the materials which you kept on website are available for 24 by 7. And computing technology, it used in the teaching, like you can use video, you can use motion pictures, that all will be very easy using this. Even the environment, online environment, is today's more acceptable by students compared to the others. And online learning makes the student very independent and self-directed. And it is also not that much expensive. You don't require a class or many things. Of course, you require certain computer and internet and all, but other requirement which is required for normal classes are less here. So if you think about the overall cost, very less. Plus, no any hi-fi labs infrastructure which are required. The biggest disadvantage here is, as recently you have seen, there is some voice problem, there is some internet speed is problem, there is some technical issues. So if you can overcome this issue, then online teaching will be very very effective. Then it also requires some gadget like smartphones, like certain if you use, if you want to utilize certain platforms, you cannot operate from the mobiles. So generally we have to check also, because most of the students are, they attend mainly from the mobile phones. So at least you require to see all those parameters. So electronic gadget like smartphones are required. So some of the students could not afford that. That is an issue. Student-teacher relationship is somewhat lesser, which is also very essential for at least pharmaceuticals and others, because in pharmacy we require a practical. Practical also we could not take. That's a disadvantage. Sometimes internal package are also expensive in this, become expensive in this COVID-19, and limited content is available online. So library resources, people go to library, see there, those kind of things become lesser. So these are all, you can say, a second side of this uh, online teaching. However, there are various digital learning platforms, so I try to cover, and I'm also giving the example in which subject also will use in this way. So maybe you can also decide where to use one. A flipped classroom approach is very possible using this digital technology. Of course, without digital technology also we can use. But in flipped classroom, the advantage is you can use any all forms of learning like oral, visual, hands-on, problem solving. So here you are very student centered. Remote learning is also possible, and more active participation and deep learning will be occurred, while better student teacher interaction occur. You can see here before class, if teacher had kept something video, the student will read that, and what they do is they will just start, listen, and start learning. During class, when class starts, there is a more, interaction. So student practice applying. If it is an old one, we use a classroom. Now we use same is in the online teaching. So the concepts with feedback is also taken. Then after the class, we will expand the knowledge through online. So these are the certain very good advantage of this on flipped classroom in an online way. One biggest issue here, major advantages in this is that teacher timings will be utilized in a proper way. If I prepare for 5 batch, suppose there are 5 batch in my class, okay, I prepared my video, student will see that video, then I will again keep it that video. So student at their own time reads the video, and then I only have to address the questions. So this is a more, student centric. But the major disadvantage is here, to divide the among students. When you divide, maybe one group have a good internet speed, one group do not have. There is an increased time spending in front of computers. If I go for a whole class like flip play, my timings will be increased. There's increased time required for teachers to prepare videos because I have to prepare videos. So video preparation is not that much easier. People require to use certain software for effective video preparations. And I have to give a time for that technology. I have to understand that technology. Some students may struggle due to their developing personal responsibility and might put them behind their peers. I can say that this will be very helpful for unit operations where equipment has to be teach to the student. We can keep a video student will to understand. Then I take my class, explain them, and then take questions. So those where explanation and mechanism and other things are there, this platform is very useful. Today, by use of it, by in every platform, I could say Zoom or Webex or Microsoft Team and many others, there is a one very good concept of breakout classrooms, where even we are also using. Where initially, we'll take a common lecture of 100 students, and then what we do is now we want to do the discussions for 1 hour. So here we will divide the student in the breakout rooms. So students will be divided in the breakout rooms. We at that time other four faculty will come and they will be coordinated with each classroom. Suppose I divided in a five, I will remain in a one and other four remain in other. Or sometimes even I can do like that. I will go to first classroom what they have done, then I only move to the second classroom what they have done, third what they have done, fourth they have done. So here you can even make a groups, do the quiz, do certain activities. This is very effective. You utilize this breakout classrooms and very effective. So 100 students afterward will divide and then we go to each group, even alone one faculty also do each group. Still it is effective because meanwhile other group are because we have already given a task. Students have started with some activity. Now I will just go to the group, ask and check its activity. Or if required, we can include some more people at a time. But at least for common lecture, we at least one faculty can do that particular. Then breakout classroom can improve the creativity, increase peer-to-peer interaction. We can even make an argument discuss, which is not possible when 100 students are in front of you. Okay. They also assist teachers on focusing on particular groups, and you come to know if this is same breakout classroom will be useful for practicals where explanation of practical you can take it common and then divide the student in the breakout classrooms and then take a question, show a demo if you are or tutorials. So all the activity become very easy even remotely from the student side also from the teacher side also. There are various ways, as I mentioned, asynchronous and synchronous. So one very good, uh, pedagogy is smart PPT. We are using PPT in our normal classrooms, but when you are going for online teaching, the purpose is, if any question in between also, I will be happy to answer. Okay, so but smart PPT is required during online teaching, which by which people can understand very easily because you have to keep a whole students in front of you for 5 lectures. Your lecture will be one, but student may have other faculty lecture. So continuously in front of the computer or a mobile is not easier. So you require to use certain platform by which they will be very interested and they will be enjoying that particular lecture. So you can use smart PPTs. Smart PPT is where uh, very interactive templates are available. You can utilize some videos in between, and they are very user friendly. So PPT template they do not create bulky files because once you create, it should be open also. So you would create a bulky files which can be difficult to run smoothly during online sessions, and PPT which can be easily accessed and viewed by the students. For example, Apple-based Keynote runs only on in Mac, but not in Windows. So suppose I create that smart PPT, but then it is very difficult to take a lecture because student cannot open this particular. Smart PPT are created by PowerPoint, Keynote, Google Slides, WPS Office, Prezi, Canva, Literal. Many more platforms are available where you can create a smart PPTs. Okay. Another approach which is used is animations. By using animations, the content and session become very interesting and better explanation of the content. animation with moving certain things. Also, as I said, we go for equipment videos, but if we prepare an animation in which some of the things about water is coming from the tap, and so that animation is showing the water coming, another animation is showing the outlet is opening, so the student can also understand very easily. So instead of videos, you can also prepare very interactive animations. The text is not much needed to explain, only what audio accompanying the animation is very helpful. Your animation creations, however, require some expertise, it is time consuming, and it also needs a bulky files. So bulky files are very difficult. It can hamper your running section, but you can depend upon the bandwidth available to you and high speed internet if it is available. Very easily you can show, and student understanding will be very easy using this animation. We utilize this for fluid flow and many other kind of chapter distillation and other way, which are a little bit difficult chapters for student to understand. But using this animations, it become now easy. This also drawback for the students who do not have a high-speed internet. So when if I want to utilize this platform, I have to convey my students to use this high-speed internet. Otherwise, what I want to convey, I could not convey because they do not have that facilities. You can create this again using PowerPoint, Animaker, Blender, Key 3D, Pencil 2D animation, and many more. This is just I'm showing some animations. Okay, so similarly, what exactly you have to do, you have to prepare, then you have to see in the slide, you have to mix, and then you have to operate. This is just so for the slide itself is very explanatory. You don't require to explain much. So similarly, you can utilize those kind of animations for your topic, for your course, and student will be very easily understand these animations. Another example I could say is in micro videos, a very good platform, and I cannot say that you use whole lecture as a videos, but you can prepare 5 minute, 10 minute videos, and this, and then you can pause. So micro videos like animations are very interesting, very informative. For an example, I can prepare a video. Suppose in microbiology lab, I want to take some session of staining. What I do, how to prepare a slide. I prepare a 10-minute video. Okay, so I start with explaining my practical, and then I start this video. The student can understand how to prepare a slide, because here the person is preparing by themselves. Small video. It should not be very longer. Otherwise, it lose the interest of the student. But it will be very better explain the content, as both audio and video will go in a synchronization. Even existing videos can also be added, or videos can also be created. I'm not telling you can always create a videos. Creating a videos require expertise, but even some videos are available in the YouTube, and you want to just show for the knowledge can also be added. Most of the existing video are available from YouTube. Even some pharmaceutical companies also put many videos. So manufacturer also put many videos. So you can put all those videos and you can understand. Here also there are various platforms: Newsvine, Captera, Animato, WE Video, and you can prepare a very good video using this. If you prepare very long video, it is bulky. So prepare a small video, then ask the question. Again, use another video and ask the question. This is very effective based on our experience. I have taken this, but again, it is not opening. I tried this. Here also some technical issues, so I could not open this. I tried, but you can utilize this micro video where what I am my message is exactly this is the structure of brain and how what are the parts of it. So this structure will be opened up, and then it show you inside part. Okay, brain में if I want to show teach the first year student about uh, anatomy and brain and its parts and its functioning, this will be open and you can see each part, and student can understand कि इसको ये बोलते हैं, इसको ये बोलते हैं. They could understand. So these are very very helpful. It is not opening, but then I may share it by mail and other. But this is a one kind of example of micro video. So you can this is a ready-made video available from YouTube, and you can show it to your students. Very helpful. Another this we have created during before also COVID and during COVID also generation of the QR code, quick response codes. This is very helpful to you quick response code for some instruments or for some explanations. Where what we have to do is it contains a data. We all are aware about this QR code, but this quick response code contains a data which direct to the website or application also. Or here fast reading is possible because majority of the population have access to smartphones. Everywhere we are seeing that people just scan this QR code, do the payment and many things in bank and many other places. QR code is now uses. But here we require QR scanners. Storage consumed is also very less. So here I will give two examples where we created it for two instruments, high pressure homogenizer and particle size analyzer. Whenever these instruments are utilized for nanoparticle development, students are doing many mistakes. And because of that, maintenance is also very high because these are very expensive equipment. So here what we created this we prepared a videos of this both the instrument that our own students have explained how to utilize. Then they opened up their instruments uh, and shown each parts of working as well as precaution for the use of this equipment are stored, and then we created a QR code. So this QR code, if anybody scan, any student scan, even they will read. They don't require student. They don't require PhD student. They don't require faculty again to understand. So they will just click it. Whole video will start. So even how to start, how to close. If I start video, I can do it. Because what precaution I have to keep it, that I can make. So similar principle can be utilized for certain other explanation of the lecture also. And similarly, now we created for around 20 instruments. We created this QR codes, so student can HPLC and other also, which are very useful and student do the mistakes, so they can just scan, understand, and utilize this. So why I've taken is the online pedagogy because this is also one of the tool. Today it may happen that sometimes student have a connection issue. They say, "Madam, share the material." So if I have created certain videos of my own and they generated QR code, I can keep it on my website. Student can scan and can listen me, can hold my lecture. Of course, recording is also one of the uh, aspect. Is there is a recording, but in recording there is a huge storage. If you want to share a recording to your student, sometimes student cannot open, sometimes student can open because there is a huge storage. But if you do like QR code, it is just click. When you click it, then it will be uploaded and then they can. So storage requirement is very less. So we found it also very effective. Sometimes one for one batch we explain and then other two batch can read this also. So even in five batch if I have to explain, I can start this and take a question only. So these are all a very helpful, pedagogical tools. If we use, teacher time will be saved, and student can easily understood without any difficulty. They don't require repetition also, and we can address their questions in an effective way. The the most common is a live session. It doesn't mean that always I have to use animation. Use even direct live session also I can use. For examples, for question answer. For like many times I have to take a viva voice for my test, or I have to take a presentations. Okay, there are certain non-written based examinations. So for that, live sessions are very helpful where I don't require to utilize any PPT or anything. Just student have to correct. And I can ask the questions, answer. Even three teachers are there, four students are there. I want to take four students in my Viva. I can take it. So when not written based examinations are there, live sessions are very good example of that particular. The live session but can be data consuming and it may require high bandwidth and speed internet. The live session can also be conducted over the same online classroom platforms which are available on Google Meet, Moodle, Easy Class, and many other platforms. So you can directly take these particular platforms in your sessions. And in this way, we can remain interactive and we can take a questions. You know, at a time I could see here, suppose 25 people together. So depend upon the platform you use, I can talk with 25 people, I can discuss, I can deliberate, and many things are possible. So these are certain, very good platforms. Apart from that, you can even explore some newer platforms for your teaching learning, like Mindomo. Mindomo is widely utilized. We have utilized for we have enroll our students using this, where mind mapping teacher can guide the students. They have to enroll, and it is problem solving, decision making discussions are possible. Another, so it is just I taken Padlet. Padlet is again another platform where you can create first classrooms. Then you can add your pictures. After completion of the picture edition and other thing, what I can do is I can take up discussions. I can take the questions. I can go for addition of my detail. So with my presentation ongoing, this all are simultaneous. So for example, in some of the sessions, suppose I said you suppose I want to explain them about the tablet manufacturing. So I can keep a figure on one side, and then I want to explain them my diagrammatic figure. So it will be a very easy here, where I'm one side and on the other side I'm trying to explain them how the tablet manufacturing is done using rotary tablet machines. So this is another platform. Then Google Classrooms, I've taken example also how I use this Google Classrooms. Everybody have a Google account. For using a Google Classrooms, you require a Google account, and most of you have a Google account with you. So this is a Google Classroom, and it is a free version available. Uh, with that, I will take a Google Classroom. There's some slide issue. There is some non-synchronous also tools you use. That's a course website and blogs. So we at Nirma will create our own course website. We create our course blogs, and we can put our course. And when students click on that, they can take content from that. These are the non-synchronous way for teaching the students. I have already talked, but then you student can take at their own time, take that content and use. This is just to show you my sites of where this is a course block I created for my three courses of NFAM 3PT 102, 202, 203. So student can click and get the content. Here, if I click on pharmacokinetics, like you can see here, what I've done that I've put a video, I've reading material with me. Some other faculties are also are conducting. So that material also I kept, and other content I can show over here. So for pharmacokinetics UPS 702, and for other content, what are available. So student can just click over here and get content for this particular. Even the faculty coordinator are changed. There is a course coordinator. We are the another coordinator. All informations and all three faculties, the content for that course can also be combined in one. Clear? So this is a course content. Then use of Google Classroom applications. What we have done is for this is one example I have given where uh, one of the course GMP and pharmaceutical process validation. What we have done is we have taken one LPW evaluation component. In that LPW evaluation component, uh, we told the student to prepare BMR and BPR for various dosage form formulation. Each student have different BMR and BPR to prepare. They have different dosage form or different task was given to them. So there are this MFARM. So 12 students were given this task. Apart from that, we have taken one C where submission of SOP for as per GMP guideline they have to prepare. So that we have given each instrument and as per the guideline they have to prepare. So they will learn about this GMP guidelines. So this was given to the student, and each 12 student have here we have enrolled our student in the Google Classroom. and you can see here all the students have submitted the document over here, and once they will submit it, we graded them also. I have not shown here, but all 12 students, when I grade them, I've kept it open. They can visualize their marks, so they can even see also. When I checked my this evaluation, and student marks also will be obtained. If I keep it at particular blocked, student could not see that. If I keep it on, student can see their marks also. So very good tool, and you can take all SOP. No, it is totally a paperless. No any submission even after COVID-19 also. If you want to reduce a paper, we can take those directly, and we can view also, and we can check also. This is my course website. We are creating like this is a non-synchronous online teaching where objective is kept, outcome is also kept, and we can put here on all content. Suppose GNP, what topics we are taking, same way pharmaceutical technology, what is there. If you go refer detailed syllabus, you can click on the detailed syllabus and other things which are taken. So here, one another thing which I want to take over here is uh, in same here in the Google, there is a Google Classroom is there with for evaluation purpose. Apart from a Google Classroom, we can use even Google Quiz. I have not taken much about the assessment part, but for assessment purpose, for online assessment purpose, you can utilize certain different platforms. One use is a LMS which is of Moodle. So we here use a Moodle, and in Moodle, very good advantage to us is we can go for different kind of quiz. We can ask the short question also. We can ask MCQ also. In MCQ also, when I want to draw a MCQ, where even answer will be not only one from four option, answer will be from two also, three also, so that all kind can be created in that model. Then short questions are possible. Even some question where only 5 points are to be mentioned. I want that name five name four testers, hardness testers. So according, I can give four, and if all four are right, I can give a 2 months. So that all kind of questions are possible. We all know that during this COVID-19, how to assess a student is was very difficult for us, because there are possibility of students can view and all those. So here we can use different kind of platforms. So here what we have done is we use those kind of platforms. Questions were given more logical, and time was given lesser, so that student will not try to see here there, and we kept our software, one software open, so that even student can try to see other document from their laptop. If they are opening something, it will be known to us. So these are all. This is one of the model. Another is a Google Quiz. I'm not taken over here, but Google Quiz. So Google itself also have a. When you go for Google and there are say 9 dots are there. When you click on 9 dots, you have Google Docs also, and you have Google. It's a Google lot of application. So Google Document also. So and Google Quiz also. So you can create a Google Quiz similarly here. In Moodle, you require to understand Moodle, and your software must be purchased by your university. Then only you can. It's not a free version, but Google Quiz is a free version. So what you can do is you can utilize this Google Quiz, and you can take your exam. You can once the paper is created, you can send your link to your students. Same way, another is a Google sharing. Google Share we all use, but then in Google sharing, if you give a right to the student also, whatever, suppose I given a task to the student for 1 week for MPharm students, every day he has to do something. So the advantage of Google sharing for that is, if student is doing from his home, he is doing at what time he has done, what time he has started, I could know each day what he has done. So daily evaluation will be possible. Or even though at any time I will start, I could know where he has started, where he has closed. So Google sharing is a very good option. Suppose one at we are more using for practicals. During practical when it starts, so that 20 students, we share that particular. So I share their methodology. how to conduct the practical. Then I give them calculation. So every student is doing calculation. So I could visualize that calculation, how they have done because I've shared. So I've also given the right that they could do. So I can see also, they could also see what I have done. So this is a two-way. This is a very, very useful. These all are very known to us, but only problem is we would not utilize that for our assessment purpose or for our teaching purpose. Google Classroom maybe you utilize that some using 16 also. But now when we are using a very different way, we use this all platforms. So you can utilize all those assessment component also. Apart from teaching, assessment tools are also very helpful, and I'm again stressing what I'm telling may not be applicable for all course. People have to use their maturity and think that which platform is utilized for which purpose. So websites creation is why it is easy. So for that course, there is a website of that course. So even 3 faculty, 4 faculty, 5 faculty are using. They all have all document here. So students do not have to go for each faculty individual. Okay, if I just it's a course-wise website. So everything is to Z are available here. Lesson plans are available. Their schedules are available. Their planning of sessions are available. When CE is there, when exam is there, when materials for review are available. Everything are available. So very good advantage of the students. A student can use this at any time. Apart from this, we have seen that there are even from ministry also, they have taken initiative for virtual labs. So remote access, we provide remote access to labs in various disciplines of science and engineering. So every university, every institute should have that particular virtual lab where even there are certain practicals where some outside people are teaching you and you are doing like drug designing and many other virtual teaching are available. So we can even learn using these virtual labs. So suppose my student want to do the optimization and they want to understand about drug design expert software. Okay, you can understand the virtual labs or some faculty is teaching. That is another option. But in virtual lab advantages there are very good videos available and even live stream can be possible. These virtual labs would cater the students at UG, PG, as well as research scholars, and continuous learning can be possible. If I want to go for some workshops for this kind of software and other, a virtual lab is a very good answer. So even after COVID also, if people are somewhere else and I want to learn, I can do it. So this will encourage students to conduct experiment. Even you can conduct. They are telling you to conduct. You can conduct experiment by arousing their curiosity. So when you're done, they will see. They will tell you whether you're done okay or not. So this will help them in learning basic as well as advanced concepts through remote experimentation. As being in pharmacy, we have so much difficulty because our student cannot do the lab, but we can utilize those kind of platform where even understanding of experimentation will be easier. So there is a learning management system, but however, students should utilize these tools for learning. There is additional web resource, video lecture, demonstration, self-evaluation, and costly equipment and resources. You can show it very well by this, otherwise available to limited number of users. However, the biggest disadvantage of virtual labs is the limited numbers. You cannot enroll 100. For utilization of this, there's a lot of internet required. So it is better not more than 30 will enroll for virtual lab, and then you can divide your labs. However, it is very effective because suppose I can say any experimentation on animals. So I cannot do in that, but I will use some software where student just say 10 milligram he said. So you can see also how much dose response is obtained. So these all are possible through virtual labs. Okay, many softwares are already available, but now there is a need to use this software so that the student experimentation and lab learning will not be hindered. So these are certain tools which are I've taken and how we can. I'm being a pharmacy faculty or student. we don't require to be a highly expert for this, but wherever we require for our course, we should be understand that, and we can use those pedagogical tools in our teaching. Of course, they require smart classrooms, smart technology, many other resources, and other things. But still, the biggest advantage is we can continue our teaching in this COVID-19 pandemic era, where otherwise student could not, study only. So, because of these advances in technology, there were more in past also, before some years also, but the whole teaching become hampered, whole continuation or whole routine become hampered. But because of this online tools and technology, now it is possible that we could continue our routine activities. So, in only thing is in pharmacy, we have a different way, like we have a, as per PCI, we have a lectures also, we have tutorials also, we have practicals also. So you can find out in best way how we can manage this tutorial, practical, as well as teachings, and use those technology. Like for tutorial, I prefer flipped classroom because here we can flip, or we can, if teachers are less, we can even use the breakout classrooms, and you can very already given the task. Just you to go there, what they've done, and answer their queries. So these are all in a brief. I have taken platform, but this platform which I utilize in pharmacy, and I found it useful. This is not an end. There are a lot of tools are available, but I found it very good for our pharmaceutical. I've already given some examples with that, so you can utilize. So my conclusion over here, this is my institute of pharmacy at the university. My conclusion for my talk is the pedagogical tools are there, but faculty is always important. Unless until you will not do the combination of pedagogical tools, your resources, your course, and other things together, you will not utilize this in effective way. So to make your online teaching very effective, use this all technology. Of course, your knowledge is important, it is always the first. But with that knowledge, same way as you have effectively teach in the class, can you effectively teach it during this online? Then to make it yes, you require to utilize those technology. Otherwise, student will not learn those things effectively. So with this, I'm ending my lecture. Thank you all for patient listening. I hope that some of my message which I want to pass you, you can understand, and sorry for inconvenience in between. Thank you very much. Thank you again, the organizer, for giving me a chance for this particular session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You explained a lot about the smart PPTs and how animations make the presentations more effective and interactive. And also you talked about the ways to create animations using Animation Maker, Blender, Pencil 2D animation, K3D. We also got to know about micro videos makers like Vine, Captura, Animoto, VVideo, which are even being used by the pharmaceutical industry these days. You also talked about QR code, which enables fast reading and also consumes less storage. So it was quite a beneficial video and presentation about faculty during the pandemic because this is the much required presentation which mostly faculties are looking these days. So, ma'am, we do have received some questions.
Sure, I will be happy to answer.
Yeah. So I'll go with the first question, which is being asked by Dr. Pavitra Bajpai.
Yeah.
That in today's age of modern technology, a large portion of education occurs online. But are online courses better than classroom teaching? And if yes, then we should not consider teachers' mental health and physical health regarding excessive use of online courses.
See, again I'm telling, teacher is important. And of course the teacher and student interaction is very important. But then we can use a combination. Suppose if after COVID-19 also, as I said, in 5 batch, I'm repeating some of the things. So I can put a common demo, and then I can give a more time on questions. I'm not telling you we should go for online teaching, but then effective way. Suppose one presentation was common, and then I can more address my question of the student. So rather than speaking same way 5 times, I prefer that they will read, they will listen my video, and then I will address more questions. So of course, teacher are required without the student-teacher interaction. That is why today also there are some issue also in online teaching also. Somewhere we could not know what who are listening to us or not listening to us. These are issues. But looking to the situation, at least we have benefited that we could teach them. Otherwise, we could not conduct the class. Okay, so we can use a combination. Classroom teaching is required. I could not say we can we you to totally stop classroom teaching. I hope that I have cleared their queries or still any queries.
Ma'am, very much, very much. So we do have another question from Dr. Pinky, and she's asking that in some of the education field like pharmacy, medical, etc., practical knowledge is of prime importance. So how can we correlate it with physical education?
Yeah, that is the biggest I have taken in my content also. The biggest issue occurs that we can teach class, we can take tutorial, but how to take the practicals? It is very difficult. But then in this situation, as I said to you, okay, you can prepare some demo of the practicals and you can show it to the student how to like run this instrument or how to carry out this practical. We have prepared some Excel sheets for some calculations. So I have explained, suppose the unit operation, filtration, some calculation is there. So I have explained them, and what I do is I send them Excel sheet and give them the dummy readings, perform them. So this is only the way at present to solve. At least they could understand how to do, and whatever available from the website and all, we can show them certain videos of conducting. And even this time we are thinking, okay, as we have now started going to the institute, students are not coming. We can go to a lab and prepare a video and show it to them, conducting whole practical, so they can at least visualize and understand. And when situation become normal, they can go to a lab and carry. But at least meanwhile, some light towards this will go. Actually. Okay.
Right. Right, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I think you have cleared our queries in a very possible manner, and it is of very great use. Definitely, I believe that the suggestions which you have given regarding the virtual labs, the teachers are definitely going to use it in the education in the coming time, because this is the need of the time. So thank you once again, ma'am, for joining us today on behalf of the entire team of Maharana Pratap College of
Thank you very much also.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. So with this, we have come to the end of our second day of faculty development program. And I'd like to thank all the speakers who have joined us today to guide us on the important aspects which is of much needed during the time of COVID-19. And a special thanks to all the participants who have joined us, be from India or from the other country. And with these warm words, we move to the end of today's section. And before signing off, I'd just like to give you a reminder that the last day of faculty development program is scheduled for tomorrow. And our first speaker for tomorrow's session will be Dr. Hemant R. Jadhav, who is professor at Birla Institute of Technology and Sciences, Pilani. So we will be proceeding our tomorrow's session sharp at 11 a.m. in the morning. And as tomorrow is the last day of faculty development program, you'll get to fill up the feedback forms. And post completion of feedback form, all the participants will be awarded with the certification of attending the same. So thank you so much from my behalf. Signing off. Thank you.